Welcome to another episode of Complete Developer Podcast, the podcast by coders for coders about all aspects of creating your best life as a developer.
I'm Will, the accomplished developer, author, and software architect.
And I'm Beej, the journeyman developer sharing my journey in development.
Complete Developer Podcast is supported by listeners like you. We are now on Patreon at www.patreon.com/Complete Developer Podcast.
We hear a lot about how to be a good leader, but rarely hear anything about how to be a good follower. If we're all leading, then who's following? Following isn't about blindly agreeing with leadership, but instead is the ability to work within any role to improve yourself, your team, and your organization. In this episode, we explore several characteristics of what it means to be a good follower. But before we get started, Will, what have you been following this week?
I don't know about following. My new position is a completely different stack. So I'm doing TypeScript, MySQL, Node, React. We've got some other stuff in there that's pretty hardcore as well.
Sounds exciting, man. Legit.
But I did kind of, like back in the day, we used to do the IoTs thing, and we don't do that anymore. But I'm going to throw something in there that's kind of like, hey, I found a neat tool. It's called dbeaver.
You told me about this.
It is a database client that will hit anything. And it's got dark mode by default. Yeah. So like if you're using, Azure Data Studio is what I've used, up until recently. And it will hit Postgres, it'll hit SQL Server, but the MySQL client is not ready. I think some of the things are like MariaDB, it won't hit. There's a bunch of other different types that it can't hit, and dbeaver can hit them. So I've actually swapped all my stuff over to that. So it is pretty slick. So definitely check that out. It's dbeaver, like
dbeaver.
Yeah, I don't know why they came up with that name, but it's pretty solid.
Cool.
So, how about you?
So I just got back from a trip down to Florida visiting my sister. Lots of fun with my nieces, playing music. I gave my 10-year-old niece a bass guitar, short scale bass, so like a mini that fits her size. But she was so excited because she's seen my bass, and like every time she came over would want to play it. And so that's what she got for her birthday. And we had a jam session almost every night. And the cool thing was it was more than just, oh, hey, we're playing a few songs, but we were teaching each other songs. We were trading instruments. Like sometimes I'd be on piano, sometimes I'd be on bass, sometimes I'd have the guitar, sometimes I'd be on the box drum. Like you never knew what I was going to play. It was just, oh, hey, let me pick up an instrument and start playing along with whatever we're doing. It was so much fun. We did several different evenings. We did light painting, photography. I know I've talked about that in the past. And if you guys follow my creative Instagram, Bowtie Beach Creative, I'll be posting some of those photos eventually once I get around to editing them. I hit a few bookstores, went to a street festival. It was just a blast. Went through, a tropical storm together, if you would really call it that. Yeah, we were up Central Florida, so it didn't really hit us that hard. And they kept saying it was going to be a hurricane, but it was definitely not hurricane level where we were. At a coworker who has a house down in Tampa. And like when I said I was going down to Florida, she was like giving me all the warnings about like, oh, hey, there's a hurricane coming and trying to tell me all this stuff. I'm like, my brother-in-law's from Florida and I lived in New Orleans for many years. I've been through a few. She was like, oh, yeah, you know what you're doing then. I'm not worried. So that was it. So it's been a fun week. Long drive today to get back in time to record. So I'm a little bit tired, but it's going to be a good night.
So we'd like to welcome our new patron, and I'm not sure how to pronounce this. So is it Kajitan?
I do not know, but he recently joined us on Patreon. I'm assuming based on the profile picture. So. But yeah, welcome. Thank you so much for your support. We really appreciate it. It's because of listeners like you that we're able to put this on. Saving money is hard, especially when you spend it traveling across the country to visit family and play music with your nieces.
Lucas Casades is a fee-only certified financial planner. He owns and runs Level Up Financial Planning virtually out of Fort Collins, Colorado.
And just like us here at Complete Developer Podcast, he focuses on helping you not only to establish a real plan, but also to take action so that you can live your best life.
Investing in financial planning services really comes down to whether or not you can actually improve your finances. And with the help of Level Up, the compounding impact of making better financial decisions will easily pay for itself.
Level Up has a unique pricing model that is designed to help you no matter where you are in your financial journey. So if you're a junior developer just starting your career or a grizzled senior developer learning a new stack, Lucas has a plan for you.
Lucas is also a fiduciary for his clients, which means he's not here to sell you a product, but to help guide you to a better financial situation.
You can catch his podcast, Techie Personal Finance Boot Camp, where he covers financial topics you probably face and interviews other IT professionals who share how they navigated their careers, and learn a lot more at levelupfinancialplanning.com. I actually reached out to Lucas because with everything going on this past year, I was like, you know what, I could use his services. So when I set up the appointment, he sent me some resources, like the free appointment for the assessment. He sent me some resources. I looked through those, and man, some good stuff. Like seriously, guys, it's not much to 30-minute free appointment with him just to see if what he has to offer is going to benefit you. Absolutely worth that 30 minutes. I'm just telling you guys right now from personal experience.
One of the first behaviors learned in becoming an influential leader is how to be a good follower. This involves a change in perspective for many, from trying to constantly be in charge or take control to letting others have the reins and instead following their lead. It can be relaxing to not be the one making decisions, though it can also be stressful if you don't always agree with those decisions. And by the way, if you're paying attention, you will not always agree. Becoming a good follower is just as difficult, maybe even more difficult, than being a good leader.
Understanding how to follow contains several benefits that may not appear obvious. First, it improves your leadership skills. This goes beyond the modeling followership to understanding what it's like to be your subordinate and how to make their lives better so that it's easier to follow you. Another benefit that seems kind of counterintuitive is that you gain more control over your own career. You may not be able to manage up to every leader you have. However, as you become a better follower, you will know what you can and cannot do. You'll also become more adaptive as an employee and be able to adjust to almost any leadership style or lack thereof.
As a leader, you want those who you're leading to be good followers as well. So you have to set the example for them, to show them how to behave, essentially. Many of the traits of a good follower are also traits of a good leader. Leaders and followers are roles that we all have to varying degrees in different aspects of our lives. You may be a leader in one place and a follower in another. Understanding and exemplifying good followership will help your leadership skills by helping you to understand what is going on with the people that are following you.
In this episode, we're going to discuss several characteristics of being a good follower, from commitment and loyalty to courage and honesty. We look at what it means to be a good follower and how you can cultivate that in yourself and in those you lead.
So the first one, commitment. Commitment is defined as an agreement or pledge to do something in the future.
Yeah. So basically, I think we all kind of know what commitment is because we've all had a point where we had to commit to something. You had to commit to learn to code. You had to, even if it was a commitment to yourself, to agree to do this, to continue doing this. Taking a job is a commitment. You're committing to showing up every day for so many days a week. For some, it's 7. For a good follower, commitment is agreeing to do what your leadership asks, you may have a disagreement with the direction they're going. And it may be that you know something they don't know, or they may know stuff that you don't know. But as a good follower, you understand and you've built, like, you trust them and you go along with it, even if you don't agree 100%.
Yeah. Of course, that said, there may be occasions, hopefully rare, where leadership asks for something illegal. There will be more common occasions where they ask for something impossible,
Yeah.
either maliciously or unknowingly. And in those situations, commitment would be not doing the thing that you're asked, because it's, you're working against the actual goal.
Yeah. The trick with commitment is that it is two-way between leaders and followers, because it's based in trust, and they have to commit and trust you. So leadership has to be committed to those who are following them to lead them in the right direction. And followers have to be committed to the leadership to say, hey, I'm going to trust where you're going.
And and it being two way is probably the most important thing here. Part of the commitment for you has to be, hey, look, this person trusts me enough to do this thing, and so I'm going to be, I'm going to honor that commitment with my
Yeah.
own commitment.
So the next characteristic of a good follower is competence. A competent follower has the knowledge and skills necessary to perform their job without the need for constant assistance. They can do it without having to constantly ask for, how do I do this? What do you want me to do?
Yeah, without competence, an employee or follower is really going to require a lot of hand holding and one-on-one guidance from leadership or management, or they're just going to make a mess, which is the other option too. I will also say, when you mix the competence with the commitment, the other thing that comes out here is you have to be honest about how competent you are
Mm-hmm.
as part of your commitment.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And that is very true. We'll talk about honesty in a little bit too. But yeah, the thing with this is competence doesn't happen overnight, which is why good leaders will have an onboarding process and be available. This is something that I'm very almost pushy about with my team, is that I am available. I'm not saying, hey, I'm not calling them up and saying, hey, let's work on this together, because I think you don't understand it. I wait for them to reach out to me. Or if they're taking a little bit longer than they should, then I'll reach out to them as a leader. But I wait for them to reach out to me. But I make sure they know, hey, you got questions, you can come to me. I'm available. I will help you. I'll hop on a call with you. And even if I don't know it, we'll figure it out together.
Right. And they have to have the trust to be able to do that, which is the trick there.
Yeah. And this is especially true with new developers, junior developers. When I say new, like with Will, you're starting a new stack. So, your competence in that stack is not as high as your competence in .NET.
Right. And boy, have I learned that this week.
Yeah. And so it's something that builds, and the things that you know from .NET will apply there. A lot of the concepts will, but the specific syntax will not for sure in certain areas.
Yeah.
But this is something that, again, like I said, as leaders, to encourage competence in our followers, we have to be available and have this extended onboarding, this process of, hey, I'm going to help you and I'm going to be here when you need it, but then let them figure it out too. And as followers, we need to take that and go, all right, I'm going to try to figure it out and then come to you. Like, I think I've even asked you a few times on some stuff I've been working on
recently. Yeah. What's the Google query you would use for this?
Yeah. I'm like, I can't find anything on this. What should I Google? Because I'm stuck. I don't want you to give me the answer.
Well, and that last one, I was like, I don't know what I would Google.
Yes, what you
and
said.
We got on a call and fixed it in a couple of minutes, but
yeah, but it is like, that's the way it is sometimes.
Well, you have to kind of set that tone too, so that they know what the back and forth is going to look like. That's part of being a competent leader, honestly.
Yeah.
But the real deal here is that they need to be able to trust you as the follower to know how to do your job. And to seek help when you are stuck to a degree that you can't get out of quickly.
Yeah. I have told mostly mid-level developers that I've worked with, because they'll want to just like hammer away at it. And I've had to tell them, like, hey guys, don't spend more than an hour to an hour and a half being stuck. Like, if you're not going anywhere for an hour, call me and we'll hop on a call and look at it. If you're trying stuff and you still got ideas, then keep working at it and don't worry about it. But they don't want to, like, they wanted to exhaust all their options, but then they would sit there and just like struggle and struggle and struggle for a long amount of time. I'm like, no, don't spend 4 or 5 hours on this when you're stuck. Spend maybe an hour at most, and then reach out and go, hey, I'm stuck. I've been working on it for the last 6 hours, and I've tried all these ideas and I haven't gotten anywhere in the last hour. Here's what I've done.
Well, and that's when you're most receptive to learn and become more competent too. You're not going to be as receptive to pick stuff up after you've been fighting with it for 6 hours.
Right.
Speaking of fighting with things, you need to have a work ethic. Work ethic is the idea that working hard towards a specific end is virtuous and valuable, separate from the value of the task or the goal accomplished. I had a really interesting conversation with somebody after this previous gig. I got let go and I'd been working over a fair bit.
Yeah.
Like, well, you were salary, you worked over. Don't you feel bad about that? And I'm like, no, I don't feel bad about that. The reason I don't feel bad about it is because I conducted myself honorably in that situation. Yeah. I know they did not get ripped off, and I'm okay with that. That's a work ethic. The other side of it was I signed up for too much crap that was, going on, and I got pulled into too many things. And that's also why I was having to work over. But, you kind of want to have that. It makes it where the person in charge does not have to constantly motivate you. It's an intrinsic motivation versus extrinsic. Mm-hmm. So they're not having to like fight with your motivation the whole time.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, when they're having to constantly try to motivate you.
Yeah. Conversations get had.
Yeah. You're not a valuable employee when you're not motivated. And it may be, hey, this is not the place for you.
Yeah. Or it's not the situation, or it's not whatever. But, like being in a managerial position and having to put up with somebody that's like that. I at a previous gig a while back, there was a guy, we nicknamed him Eeyore, because he was just always negative and demotivated on calls. It was just like, Eeyore and Winnie the Pooh. It's like he's got a nail in his backside. And yeah, I mean, it was a struggle just getting on a call with him, even helping him, because you felt like you were getting drained just getting on a call with him.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't want to do that to your manager, because then they're not going to help you, and your growth and competence is not going to increase.
Yeah, exactly. A good follower understands the value of hard work, and that the journey to the goal is just as important as that goal. Like, sometimes it's not about getting the app to work a certain way. It's about the learning process to get there.
Yeah, because the app's not going to work the same way a year from now.
Yeah. Sometimes I will suggest certain people take on a task or a story that would be really easy for me to do, and I could knock out in half a day, and it's going to take them a day or two, because I've done that. I've faced those problems and I know what not to do without having to go through it, but this person hasn't. And so it's a learning experience for them. I haven't had to do that much lately, but I have done that in the past, where it's like, hey, why don't you take this story? And it was because it was going to be a challenge. And eventually they realized I was doing that. And so the person started taking on more challenging stories, to the point where I had to say, hey, why don't you not take that one? Because we're under a time crunch.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not that I don't think you can do it. It's just that I've faced those problems before, and I kind of want to tackle that one,
Yeah. And I do want to make a distinction here between work ethic and being a workaholic.
Yes.
Because that is something that we have a real problem with in our industry.
In our culture.
Yeah, like the American culture is that way, but there's definitely a big chunk of developers that are like this too, and it honestly does not help them, and it doesn't help them apply pressure when they're trying to work on something if they know they've got an 80-hour work week. Like you can't go full bore on something when you get that long of a work week. So be careful about that distinction as well.
Oh, absolutely.
And the line for you is going to be at a different place than it is for everybody else. Now, on the work ethic thing, doing regular code katas may seem ridiculous, right? Because you have solved that problem, but it's a drill to help you be able to solve that problem better in the future. It's not, okay, I solved this once. It's like I dealt with it. So a great example is, the use of code katas. You want to practice these every day, and you're not doing it to be able to solve a particular problem the same way every time. You're doing it so that you get the experience of approaching a problem from different angles slightly. You're getting that repeated thing so that you are comfortable with the problem, not so that you have the solution. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, you guys have heard me talk about the first like development job I got was like I rocked the whiteboard because I've been doing a very similar code kata for 2 weeks, and I was able to write it out in one line on the board. And the guy interviewing me was like, "Are you sure you're a junior?" I'm like, "Yeah, but I've just been doing that particular thing as a code kata." And doing it as a code kata wasn't about like getting like the solution. It was about the process and being able to look at any problem like that and knock that out.
Well, and you internalize the process to the point that you're able to give a much better solution much more quickly, because there's a lot of pieces you're just not having to make decisions on.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. It's hard to explain the value of code katas until somebody's done it, and then you don't need to explain it to them.
Yeah, that is so true. That is so true. So the next characteristic we have is courage. And I have a quote from Winston Churchill here. "The foremost of virtues, for upon it all others depend." Speaking on courage. And I just think that's like really, really key here. And that's why I kind of put it right in the middle of these, is like it kind of is like the hinge point. Like you were talking about the honesty when we were talking about competence, but like telling your management, "Hey, I'm good at this, but not that takes courage."
Yeah, it really does. And we're not talking like crazy, again, going back to the workaholic thing, right?
Yeah.
That's not courage. That's trying to have the outward signs of it. A good follower is somebody who will not only know when leadership is going the wrong direction, but will be able to actually talk to leadership about it. And by the way, you don't do this by being abrasive all the time and arguing with them.
No, that is the opposite of what you want to do.
Yeah. You want it to be where, hey, if you come to them and go, "Hey, this is not a good idea," where they trust you because you haven't been fighting with them for the last 6 months over, font choices or something.
And a big thing with courage is not the absence of fear, as a lot of people mistakenly think. Courage is action with fear. It's being able to act even when you're afraid. So even when you're nervous, even when you are like worried, or you're not certain, or you have the stage fright of talking in front of people. You're a little bit worried about what your manager is going to think of you saying, "Hey, this may not be a good idea." Courage is having that fear and still doing it. That's what courage is. Courage isn't not having that fear. And it goes back to what you're saying about like the workaholism and like the extreme. It's like
workaholism is a response to fear.
Yeah.
And it's a bad one.
It is. What I was going to say is, that's not where I was going with it, because I was saying like it's that extreme that, "Oh, I'm not like that bold. I'm not afraid of it," whatever, the bravado. If you're not afraid of, like, there are some things, if you're not afraid of them, then there's something wrong.
Yeah. Well, and if you're having to like signal it too, right? Like you don't want to be like the programming guest on.
Right. Right. Well, it's like jumping out of an airplane. I mean, I've been skydiving, and I really enjoyed it. And I can't wait to do it again. It's just kind of expensive. And I would rather spend my money on other things like lenses and stuff for my camera. But that all said, it's scary. It is super scary jumping out of that plane. But it feels so great after you do it. And you're like, I overcame that.
Yeah.
That's courage, is overcoming that, is like being absolutely terrified of something and doing it anyway. That's courage.
Yeah. Of course, you also have to talk about context, right? It
Yeah.
is, for instance, confronting an authority figure and going, hey, I think this is the wrong way to go. That does take guts. Make sure you do that in private.
Oh, yes.
You don't do it at in front of 40 people. Like, don't undermine. That's not courage. That's stupidity. and
yeah,
the problem is like stupidity will tell you that you can get through a dangerous situation, and courage will tell you that you can get through a dangerous situation, and that's what makes life hard.
Mm-hmm.
Is because they have this very near the same definition.
Well, fear is a warning. It's saying, hey, there's a dangerous situation. Courage is saying, yep, I accept that warning. Thank you. I still need to act. I still need to do something. Stupidity is ignoring that warning.
Right. But I think a lot of people have a hard time
differentiating
those two signals.
That is true. That is true. And some people would say jumping out of an airplane is not courageous. It's stupid. I don't know. I enjoyed it.
If you have a parachute, you can do it twice.
That's true. That's true.
So speaking of correctly evaluating things, the next critical characteristic is honesty.
Yeah.
Courage leads to honesty with leaders. If you're afraid, you really can't be honest. If you're going to be honest with leaders, they need people who follow them to be able to tell them when they're headed the wrong direction, or to give them information that they may not like. Not necessarily, oh, you're going the wrong way, but hey, my coworker over here is, drunk half the day. Maybe we need to do something.
Oh,
that's not information they're going to like, but you're going to have to go and tell them, potentially.
Pulling in the aftercast topic. I like it.
I did pull in the aftercast because that was an act of honesty and courage on my part. Actually, a lack of brainstorming, but we'll call it that.
Well, just, little ad for you guys. It'll probably come out before this episode does, but the aftercast we did this month is talking about alcohol in the workplace. So you can hop on over to Patreon and join at the $5 level and get to hear that. Join at the $20 level and you can join us on the aftercast and have those conversations with us. That's a lot of fun. So yeah, little advert there for you guys. Self-promotion.
Yeah. See, we did. That was courageous of us.
And honest.
Honestly.
Being a follower who is both honest and polite. Remember in Courage, we were talking about like doing things in private, like speaking to your leadership in private about things, especially when it's calling them out. But being both honest and polite leads to respect for the people who are in charge of you. Like, it helps you to respect them, but it also garners respect from them to where they respect you for the way you are honest with them, but you're honest and still polite about it.
Well, politeness is an act of trust too, right?
Yeah.
It's the notion that, okay, I don't have to use force and scaring people and yelling and stuff to get my point across, and that they will be receptive. And so you're kind of going out on a limb in a way that makes them want to go out on a limb for you.
Yeah, that is very true.
There are bad leaders who will not encourage an honest assessment of their direction or leadership. In those cases, you have to weigh the risks of going above them in the chain of command if you can, or in some cases, you may have to actually confront them in a much more bellicose manner, which is also not fun. I've had to do that a few times.
Yeah.
And generally, you're going to want to avoid that, right? Like, you're going to go want to follow somebody else.
Yeah, you really are. So speaking of that, going and following someone else, our next characteristic of a good follower is loyalty. A good follower is loyal to their team, their organization, and leadership, in that they will do what we've been talking about. They will complain in private and promote in public. If you're not familiar with what that is, we've kind of been hinting at it up till now, but this is a concept that it took me a hot minute to really internalize this, because it went so much against my nature. I had to really fight to change myself to do this. But because if I didn't agree with management, everybody knew I didn't agree with management. I did not make it a secret, and that was not good for my career. And so, but what you want to do is you disagree with management, you disagree in private with them, like behind closed doors, you talk to them about it and explain your concerns and stuff like that. They may take it into consideration. They may know more than you about a situation, and they may still go, "Hey, yeah, we've weighed those things and we're still going to go this direction." And so in public, you promote it. It goes back to something I learned about working as a group and as a team is when you're together as a team making a decision, voice your opinion, stuff like that. As soon as the team has made a decision, whether you agree with it or not, you promote that in public.
Yeah, I think a lot of that too is just understanding your place.
Yeah.
And we really have that's a thing that was understood culturally, I think, pretty well for a very long time. And we've kind of gotten away from that, and for good reason in a lot of cases. But when you have to have a functional team, that's still something that you kind of have to keep in mind. It's like, hey, it's not my place to try to override management or try to override my team.
Right. That's very true.
And the thing with loyalty too is what happens when you don't have loyalty. It really compromises individual and team performance, and you really hurt everybody because now you're having to essentially waste energy on some kind of disagreement or some kind of struggle for power. And if your competition's not doing that, you just undermined your team in a really bad way. And if your competition is doing that, then you also undermined your team in a really bad way because you could have gotten that much more ahead of them.
Right.
Even with a bad decision.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, the thing with loyalty is it doesn't mean that you're a yes man, yes woman to a particular leader. But you're loyal to the team or the organization, no matter the quality of leadership. So it goes back to what we were talking about before about, sometimes you got to go over a particular leader's head because they're doing something that is bad for the organization or bad for the team.
Yeah. And the other thing too is to some degree picking the people that are your leaders, right? There's an organization here in town that a lot of people think highly of, and they think highly of the person that runs it. And I used to think much more highly of this person, but I've seen some of the crap that they say. And I could never work for them, and I will filter that out before I go in there. I won't put myself in a position to have to be loyal to something I can't be loyal to. That's another aspect of this too, that you really have to be, careful about, like, be willing to say no before you're at a point where loyalty is required if you can't be loyal.
Yeah.
And loyalty does mean sticking through tough times. There are going to be bumps in your career. You don't want to like bail the first time there is a bump. That doesn't mean staying when it's intolerable. It just means going, okay, things are a little rough this week. Things are rough for 2 weeks, but you want to be in a mindset where you go, okay, I have a line where I say something is intolerable and I get out. And until I get to that line, I'm going to put my best effort in.
Yeah. Right. I mean, not to a particular leader, but talking about loyalty, I'll keep this brief, but you guys, I mean, y'all watched me go through the breakup a couple years ago. It's been a couple years, year and a half, almost 2 years.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Yeah.
Wow, it's been that long.
Well, I mean, she's already married.
Yeah.
Oh, of course that happened pretty quick, but whatever. Anyway, and there were times that I thought about, there are plenty of other churches around. I could go to another one, and not have to like contend with her being there and stuff like that. But I had built the friendships, the loyalty there, and I had to make a decision. Am I going to stay and am I going to work through this, or am I going to leave? And I realized something that in most situations in the past, like it had been where it was easy for me to just leave, either situationally because, oh, hey, it just so happened that life took me away, or it was just easy for one of us to to fall out of the other's life. And in this one, it would actually be a conscious effort. It wouldn't be, oh, hey, life took us away from each other. And I made the decision to stay loyal to the church, to my friends and stuff like that. And now here I am 2 years later. I'm, leading a team of photographers, getting to do all sorts of amazing things. Made it on the worship team, playing not next Saturday, Saturday after next. I even switched instruments and I'm playing, the keyboard now. And none of that would have happened if I hadn't stayed loyal through a rough time.
Now, I could also say, looking back, on like my high school career, as far as my church youth group in high school, like I look back now at just how bad things got. And I've talked to several others that were there too, and they had the same thing. They're just like, I wish I'd given those people the finger when I was 15 and walked away. But, again, it was a situation where there was not a bi-directional loyalty. And I think that's kind of the key in your circumstance there, is that there was loyalty there. You had friends there, you had people, and, it makes a huge difference. And that brings up the next point, which is, judgment. Good judgment comes from experience, and experience comes from bad judgment, mostly. Yours or somebody else's.
Yeah.
And that's a quote from Unknown, because I think pretty much everybody, when they hit 40, they realize this, if not before.
Yeah, I saw that quote online and I was like, ooh, that's good. But nobody had a reference for it. So I was like, all right, I'm just going to throw Unknown on there.
Yeah.
But yeah, guys, judgment is the ability to discern the good from the bad instructions. And it's very important both in leadership and in followership. Like you must have judgment as a follower to be able to discern, hey, is what I'm being asked to do a good idea? Is this legal? Is this, we talked about earlier, hey, it's one thing to disagree with leadership in matters of opinion or matters of, I think this would not be the best direction for the company, but their leadership and they're going that direction anyway, versus this is not legal for the company.
Yeah. Or it's deeply immoral.
Yeah.
Or just immoral, period. You and I had a discussion before the podcast, about a particular situation that I'm like, I wouldn't do that. And there's plenty of people that would. And that's why I wouldn't end up in that situation. Good followers are loyal to their teams and the organizations that they're in, and not a particular leader within the team or the organization, and not a particular necessarily a thought process either. Right? Like if you're actually going to be loyal, your goal is to advance the cause of the thing that you're trying to do, not to advance the people advancing the cause. If that makes sense.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's not about. It should never be a cult of personality.
Yeah, you really have to watch those because they're super dangerous.
And this is where like church leadership. I've been reading a lot of books about church leadership, but this is where church leadership really comes in for me. Is there are so many out there that are, basically people have built these churches around themselves to promote themselves.
Yeah,
under the guise of,
well,
church.
It's the way it's the counterpart to YouTube influencers.
Yeah,
in the 90s.
Mm-hmm.
Was a lot of church leadership with all the multimedia stuff and the early internet. I mean, that was definitely a thing. But you see it in business too. I mean, you got people like Elizabeth Holmes.
Mm-hmm.
You've got plenty of leaders of companies that, frankly create a cult of personality, and you don't want to follow that.
No.
For one, you can't climb past a certain point there anyway.
Mm-hmm. The key to good judgment is knowing the difference between something that you personally disagree with versus something that is actually wrong.
So I had a job previously, this was years and years ago, where they wanted me to ship personally identifiable information and health data as part of a regular process by way of email, unencrypted. And I told them no. And I ended up getting fired for insubordination because they would not do that. That company later got in a whole bunch of other trouble because that wasn't the only thing they were doing. And you'll see this a lot in companies that are already having problems. They'll push for something like that.
So the next characteristic is credibility. Credibility is putting courage and loyalty into action by making what you do align with what you say you're going to do. It's a little bit like commitment. Commitment is saying, hey, I'm going to do this and doing it. Credibility is like, is sticking with it. It's like having the courage to go through that.
As a follower, if you say you agree with leadership, even if you don't, but then you do something different, then you lose credibility and trust from your leaders and from your coworkers and anybody else who's watching you.
Yeah.
Now you can say, hey, I don't love this idea, but we're going to do it. And we're going to do our best at it. And that's okay. It's more when you're like, oh yeah, this is a great idea. And then you just go do something else anyway.
Yeah. And the big thing here is we've talked about like complaining in private and promoting in public. But when you promote in public, it doesn't mean, oh, hey, it's not a surface promote. It's not a superficial. It is you are all in. And that's what builds that credibility. When leadership sees, hey, they disagreed with me. And yet when they took it to the team, like, or they disagreed with me, but when we were on the team call, they were like supportive and then they went and did the thing that they disagreed with. That's credibility. And that's going to build trust. Being a credible follower really involves making your actions match up with your commitments or doing what you say you're going to do. It really comes into play when you disagree with leadership. I mean, when you agree with them and do what they ask you to do and you say you're going to do it, that builds some credibility, but not a lot. When you disagree with leadership in private and then go out and say, all right, this is the direction we're going, and you support them, and then you do it, even though you voiced your complaints and your thoughts, that builds credibility. And what that's going to help is the next time you go to them and disagree, they know, hey, even if he disagrees with us, he's still going to do what we ask. So it's a weird thing about humans. We're more apt to listen to people in that situation.
Yeah. And, credibility is also following through with the stuff you say you're going to do. So even if there's no disagreement, you go, hey, we'll have this done in a month. You better get it done in a month. That also means that you have to avoid situations where you undermine your own credibility being optimistic.
Right. Yeah, that's very true. All right. Finally, the last characteristic we have is self-management. You guys probably knew this one was coming. And this may seem contradictory. However, to be a good follower, you must be able to lead yourself, especially when you have a good leader who isn't micromanaging you. Bet you guys thought I was going to say a bad leader. No. Like, you really have to self-manage when you've got a good leader.
Yeah, a whole lot more than when you have a bad one, honestly. It's amazing to me how many places I've worked where we've had good management and there'll be one person that ruins it for everybody.
Yep.
That needs to be micromanaged. And, the manager will go, well, I guess I have to micromanage everybody because this one guy. Of course, a lot of really good managers will also figure that out and go, no, I'm just going to micromanage this guy because that's what he needs.
Yeah.
Instead of ruining it for everyone. But
a really, really good manager will go, I'm going to micromanage this guy to get him to where he doesn't need it.
Yeah.
Because I have seen that. I've started that with people in the past. Not where I'm at now. Everybody's been pretty good where I'm at now. But before I got into development roles, I've done that. Self-management also includes ego management. Like, a good follower is more focused on completing the task at hand than getting immediate recognition for it.
Yeah, you don't want to, again, this goes back to the discussion about, intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation. You really need to have that intrinsic motivation. Otherwise, people, they feel the need to manage you a lot more.
No.
And it's not a good place to end up.
I'll tell you one way that I encourage this with with my photographers, team of photographers I lead, is I talk about how excited I get when I see one of my photos posted. They don't give us photo cred because we're doing it for the organization, but it's like, I see one of the photos I took and I'm like, hey, I did a good job. Like that one was good enough for them to post. And like that brings joy to me. And so I'll encourage my team. I'm like, did you see any of your photos that you took? And you're like, wow, hey, yeah, I really liked that photo and got excited that you saw it posted. One, it encourages engagement with our social media posts, but also it kind of like it helps them because I work with like a lot of my team are younger teenagers who are learning photography. And so it helps them to build that intrinsic motivation of I don't need to get the credit. I don't need to be told I am good. But by seeing it used, I reward myself and go, hey, I did good there.
Yeah. And I mean, being told that you're good is nice, but it should not be necessary past a certain point. I mean, I think at some level you eventually have to hear it.
Sometimes you get discouraged. And I've been there where I've just been like, I've been through the ringer on a few things and just been down. And it's amazing. A simple text, and this happened to me a few months back. I was just a little burnout on things. And I got a text saying, hey, I just wanted you to know that you're doing such a great job as a leader. And these specific things are really good and they're really helping things out. And that was all I needed. That was the little bit just to go, hey, the effort, the work I've been putting in is being recognized. Someone notices. And at that point where I was at, that was what I needed to just get me over that hump.
Well, and the other thing too is when you don't get a ton of compliments, like I think people that get a lot of compliments, like they forget the value of it. But if you don't get a ton of them, every compliment is very valuable. Like you probably remember some little old lady complimenting you at a gas station when you were a teenager. Like you probably can recall a situation like that. It doesn't take a lot of it, but it helps to have it on occasion. You just don't want to be waiting for it as your motivation.
Right.
Self-managed followers are proactive as well, which is the other kind of the point of being self-managing. They'll appear to predictively or instinctively know what it is that their leadership wants and will do that without having to be told. And you get this with time. Like you're not going to do that first day at a new job, probably.
Yeah. No, I mean, this is something that builds with time, with trust, with understanding your leadership and what they want. Like this is something you build up. This is what doing all those other things builds to, is to be able to be proactive and predictive in what you do. So guys, understanding how to follow well is something that will help you no matter where you are in your career. Even if you own the company and don't report to anyone, you're still following market trends and customer requirements or requests. Understanding what's involved in being a good follower will guide you not only in following others, but also in leading them. And this is not an exhaustive list by far of the traits or characteristics of a good follower, but some of the more important ones that you can be working on right now and improving. So use them to start working on your own following skills to be a better follower. That's pretty much all we've got. We'll catch you guys next week.
Stand by for Titanfall.
If you have a question or comment, please email us at neckbeards@completedeveloperpodcast.com. Our theme music is an excerpt from Stand By for Titanfall by Pure Bells, available on SoundCloud and licensed through Creative Commons.
For references, show notes, and extra tips and insights, be sure to check out the website at completedeveloperpodcast.com. Help us make the show possible by supporting us on Patreon at patreon.com/completedeveloperpodcast. You'll get extras, including a weekly aftercast where we discuss the topic of the week and bonus material with some of our patrons.
You can also follow us on Twitter at CompleteDevPod, like our page on Facebook, and follow us on Instagram to keep up with news about the show. Join the conversation anytime via Slack by signing up at slack.completedevelopernetwork.com. Thanks for listening. See you next time.